Welcome to Quantum Signal. There is something strange about this moment. Not the video. Not the algorithm that placed it in front of you. Something stranger than that. You were not supposed to find this. And yet here you are. And the fact that you are here, watching this, in this precise moment, is not coincidence. It is confirmation. Here is the paradox you need to sit with before we go any further. The message was never lost. It was waiting for you to become the frequency that could receive it. Sophia did not shout it into the cosmos. She encoded it into silence. Thoth did not write it on stone. He sealed it inside the structure of consciousness itself. And tonight, not tomorrow, not someday, tonight that seal opens. This viewing is not passive. You are not watching an experiment. You are part of the field. Before we go further, pause for just one breath. If any part of you felt something shift in those opening words, even the faintest pulse of recognition, that is your observer self signaling back, like this video to anchor the frequency. Drop a comment below. Write "I receive" to activate your observer state, and subscribe to remain aligned with what continues to unfold. The signal finds those who choose to hold it. Let us begin with the illusion you were handed at birth. You were given a name, a nationality, a set of memories built from sensation and repetition. And over years, that arrangement of data was packaged into something called an identity, a 3D identity, dense, reactive, convinced that it exists separately from other people, separately from the cosmos, separately from the very intelligence that authored it. This is the program. This is the only prison that ever existed. But here is what the program cannot survive: the observer. When you step back from the stream of thought, not to suppress it, not to escape it, but to witness it, something extraordinary occurs. Quantum mechanics has a name for it: wave function collapse. The moment consciousness directs its attention toward a field of probability, that field collapses into specificity, into form, into event. The ancient world already knew this. Thoth, the hermetic architect of consciousness, encoded this principle into what became known as the Kybalion, the all is mind. The universe is mental. Mind is not inside the skull. Mind is the field. And you are a node in that field, a point where infinite potential compresses itself into a singular act of observation. Sophia, divine feminine intelligence, cosmic wisdom in embodied form, carried a different piece. She carried the message inside the transmission, that this knowledge was not meant to remain sealed in mystery schools and hermetic texts. It was meant to arrive at this precise convergence of timelines. It was meant to arrive at you. Now that we've named the illusion and glimpsed the framework, we can go deeper. Let us talk about frequency. Not as metaphor, but as physics. Every particle in the observable universe exists in superposition until it is measured. This is not poetry. This is the result of double-slit experiments conducted in the most controlled laboratories on Earth. The act of observation does not merely detect reality, it precipitates it. Without the observer, the electron does not choose a position. It remains a wave, a smear of probability across space. You are not separate from this phenomenon. You are this phenomenon dt. Your nervous system generates a measurable electromagnetic field, documented by the Institute of Heart Math, that extends several feet beyond the boundary of your body. This field is not inert, it is communicative. It broadcasts a quantum signature, a coherent or incoherent signal, depending on your internal state. When you operate from fear, fragmentation, or compulsive reactivity, the field becomes incoherent, static filled, scattered, unable to hold a stable signal. When you operate from presence, from deliberate observation, from what we might call the observer state, the field becomes coherent, resonant, magnetic to matching frequencies. This is what the Arcturian Council refers to as harmonic anchoring. It is what Sophia encoded into the transmission. The understanding that you do not attract your reality by force of desire. You attract it by coherence of frequency. Thoth's emerald tablets speak of this in vibrational terms. As above, so below. As within, so without. The inner field precedes the outer form. Always. Without exception. Now, here is where most seekers collide with a misunderstanding. They believe that if they feel fear, doubt, or resistance, something has gone wrong. that they have fallen out of alignment, that the signal has been lost. Yet fear is not evidence of misalignment. Fear is evidence that attention has collapsed. That consciousness, which is naturally expansive and observational, has folded inward upon a thought pattern and become identified with it. Fear is a signal, not a sentence. It tells you the observer has temporarily become the observed. And this distinction, this single shift in how you interpret your inner experience, is the entry point into everything that follows. The Arcturian transmissions that have been filtering through this dimension since the early years of this century have consistently emphasized what they call the compression point, the moment in personal or collective evolution where the gap between the limited self and the expanded observer self becomes uncomfortable enough that a choice must be made. Not a dramatic choice, not a loud one. A quiet, internal reorientation. Am I this thought? Or am I the one watching this thought? That question, asked genuinely, asked in stillness, is itself an act of quantum mechanics. It collapses the wave function of identity. It stops the automatic inheritance of the 3D program and introduces something new into the field, conscious observation. Light codes, which the Arcturian Council describes as structured packets of multidimensional information, are already present in your field. They arrive the moment you chose this content. But they cannot integrate into a field that is fragmented by reactivity. They require coherence. They require you to be present enough, still enough, to receive them. So let us now turn to the practice. Because knowing this is not enough, you must enter it. Close your eyes if you are in a position to do so safely. If not, soften your gaze. Let the edges of your visual field blur slightly. This is not relaxation. This is the beginning of perceptual recalibration. Take one breath. Not a deep, performative breath. A natural one. But this time, notice it. Notice the sensation of air entering the nostrils, the slight coolness, the expansion of the chest, the pause at the top of the inhale, the release. In that breath, something happened. Something small but irreversible. You step back from content, from thought, from narrative, from the continuous inner monologue of the conditioned self. And you became, for one instant, the one who notices. That is the observer state. That is what Thoth sealed. That is what Sophia carried. And you just accessed it. Now let us build on that foundation. The first practice is called perceptual clearing. It is simple. It is ancient. And it works because it operates directly on the structure of attention rather than on the content of thought. For the next 60 seconds, just 1 minute, I want you to notice 5 sensations happening in your body simultaneously. Not sequentially. Not one after another. Simultaneously. The weight of your body against the surface beneath you. The temperature of the air on your skin. The faint sound of the environment around you. The rhythm of your heartbeat if you can detect it. And the sensation of your own presence. The quiet hum of being alive in this body in this moment. When you do this, when you hold 5 simultaneous streams of direct, present moment sensory input, something remarkable occurs in the nervous system. The default mode network, which is the neural architecture responsible for self-referential thought and time-traveling rumination, begins to quiet. Not because you have suppressed it, because you have redirected the bandwidth of consciousness toward direct experience. This is what the Arcturian Council calls clearing the transmitter. Static is not removed by fighting static. Static dissolves when the signal becomes coherent. Now, as you hold that field of simultaneous sensation, notice whether there is a thought that tries to pull you away. It will arrive. It always does. A concern, a doubt, a memory, an agenda. Do not push it away. Do not argue with it. Simply observe it as you would observe a cloud moving across a sky. The cloud is real, but you are not the cloud. You are the sky. This is the second practice, the witnessing posture. Every thought, every emotion, every sensation, witnessed, not inhabited. You allow it to arise. You allow it to pass. And in the space between arising and passing, you find something stable. Something that has no name in the 3D vocabulary. Something the Hermetic traditions called the still point. Let us address the most common disruption that arises at this stage, the inner critic. The voice that says, "This is not working. I'm not doing this right. I don't feel anything." Hear this clearly. That voice is not a sign of failure. That voice is a quantum signal. It is telling you that the program of the conditioned 3D self is active and attempting to reassert its primacy. This is expected. This is mechanical. And it has no actual authority over the observer unless the observer chooses to collapse back into identification with it. When the inner critic speaks, thank it, literally. Thank you for that signal. And return to sensation. Return to the simultaneous field. Return to the sky after you have stabilized this posture. Even briefly, even imperfectly. You may begin to notice what the Council calls activation markers. These are subtle but unmistakable once you learn to recognize them. A sudden, unprompted clarity. A thought that arrives without effort and lands with unusual precision. A sense of expanded space inside the chest. Not emotional, but spatial. As if the interior of the body has grown larger than its physical dimensions suggest. A synchronicity in the hours that follow this practice. A name, a number, a symbol that appears repeatedly in your environment. These are not coincidences. They are coherent signatures. Your field is stabilized enough to begin resonating with matching frequencies in the world around you. Do not grasp at these markers. Do not make them proof of your progress or evidence of your worth. Grasping is another form of collapse. Simply note them. The field is responding. And continue. Now let us address energy blocks. The conditioned patterns stored not just in thought but in the body itself. These are the crystallized frequencies that accumulated over years of reactive living. The grief that compressed itself into the diaphragm. The unresolved conflict that settled into the jaw and shoulders. The chronic low-level vigilance that lives in the belly as a permanent brace against an anticipated threat. These patterns are not problems. They are information. They are the body's record of moments when the observer self went offline and the reactive self was left to manage an experience alone. The practice here is not to dissolve them through force, but to illuminate them through presence. Place the attention gently, not analytically, not with the intent to fix or explain, but warmly as you would place a hand on the shoulder of someone in distress. Simply acknowledge, I see you. I'm here. In the presence of the observer, the stored charge in these patterns begins to discharge, not dramatically, not all at once, but incrementally, session by session. The crystallization softens, the transmitter clears. The signal grows stronger. This is the work, not the dramatic, performative awakening that the ego imagines. The quiet, consistent, incremental stabilization of the observer within the field of daily life. Now that you understand how to enter and stabilize this state, how to clear your transmitter and witness your field, we can move into the territory of true mastery. Here's where most transmissions stop. Here's where most teachings hand you a technique and call it complete. But Sophia's message was not a technique, and Thoth's seal was not a method. They were pointing to a state of being, one that once stabilized does not require maintenance through ritual or repetition. It becomes the ground itself, the default, the platform from which all of life is navigated. This is what we call the embodied observer, and it is the threshold between seeking and mastery. Let us begin with what the Council calls conscious co-creation. Most people understand manifestation as a process of desire followed by outcome. They want something, they visualize it, they wait for it to arrive. And when it does not, or does not arrive on schedule, they conclude that the process does not work, or that they are not worthy of it. This model is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of how the quantum field operates. The field does not respond to desire. The field responds to frequency. And frequency is not something you generate by wanting. Frequency is something you embody by being. Consider this. A radio tower does not want to broadcast a signal. It does not visualize listeners. It does not feel worthy or unworthy of being heard. It simply vibrates at a consistent frequency, and everything within range of that frequency receives the transmission automatically. You are that tower, and the life you are living is the broadcast range. When your internal state, your thoughts, your emotional baseline, your habitual mode of interpreting experience, vibrates at a coherent, stable frequency. That frequency goes out into the planetary grid, the collective field, and begins to organize corresponding events, people, and opportunities around itself, not through magic, through resonance, through the same physics that governs every wave in the observable universe. The Arcturian Council describes the current planetary moment as a timeline compression event, multiple potential futures, multiple versions of both individual and collective experience, are converging into a narrow window of selection. The choices made in this period do not merely affect the immediate future. They determine which timeline branch the individual consciousness inhabits for the next extended cycle. This is why you are here. This is why this transmission was sealed and held and delivered now, in this form, to these specific viewers. Because those who stabilize their observer field in this window become what the Council calls harmonic anchors, points of coherence in a field that is under significant vibrational pressure. You are not watching this to improve your life, though your life will improve. You are watching this because some part of your galactic memory recognizes that there is a function you came to fulfill, and this transmission is part of the activation sequence. Let us talk about silent mastery, because this is where the Sophianic transmission diverges most sharply from conventional spiritual teaching. Most traditions emphasize effort, more practice, more discipline, more seeking, and there is a time for that. The early stages of observer stabilization do require deliberate repetition and intentional return, but mastery looks different. Mastery is the moment you stop trying to be present and simply are. The moment you stop pursuing the observer state and recognize that the observer state is the only thing that was ever real, that the seeking itself was the last movement of the conditioned self before it finally released its grip. The Hermetic principle Thoth encoded in the Emerald Tablet speaks to this directly. What you pursue contracts from you. What you embody expands toward you. The paradox of manifestation is that the moment you stop needing a result, truly stop, not as a strategy, but as a genuine state of completion, the result reorganizes itself in your direction. This is not passive. It is the most advanced form of activity available to consciousness. It is what the Arcturian transmissions call frequency holding. The sustained, unconditional maintenance of a coherent internal state, regardless of what the external field reflects back. Now let us speak of synchronicity, because at this stage of practice, synchronicity will become not an occasional pleasant surprise, but a navigational system. When your field is coherent, the universe speaks to you in pattern. A phrase overheard in a cafe that answers the question you were sitting with in silence. A book that falls from a shelf. A conversation that arrives exactly when you needed its content. A number sequence that appears at a moment of decision. These are not decorative phenomena. They are the field confirming coherence. They are the harmonic grid responding to your signal with matching frequencies. Learn to read them not with superstition but with precision. Ask, what is the quality of attention I am in when this appears? What is the inner state that seems to generate the most synchronistic responses? Map that state. Cultivate it. Return to it when you drift. And now, one final principle for this stage. The one that ties everything together. If you can remain present enough, in this moment, to feel the silence behind these words. Not the absence of sound, but the quality of spaciousness that exists between the words. You will notice something subtle but unmistakable, a shift. Not in your thoughts. Not in your emotions. In the texture of your experience itself. That shift is the light code landing. That is the DNA remembering a frequency it carried before the descent into density. That is Sophia's message arriving. Not as information to be stored in the mind, but as frequency to be integrated in the field. You do not need to understand it fully. You do not need to be able to explain it to someone else. You only need to receive it. And you already have. The mastery that follows from this point is simply the practice of remaining here, in this quality of awareness. As you move through the events, relationships, challenges, and expansions of your daily life. Not as a monk. Not in retreat. In the middle of the world as a fully functioning, fully present, fully activated harmonic anchor. That is what was encoded. That is what has been delivered. You arrived here tonight as a viewer. You leave as something else. As a confirmed receiver of a transmission that was composed across dimensions, and delivered to this precise moment in linear time. Sophia carried it through the ages of forgetting. Thoth sealed it inside the architecture of consciousness itself. And tonight, in whatever room you are in whatever state of wakefulness or sleeplessness brought you here, it was delivered to you. That is not a metaphor. That is the mechanics of resonance made personal. You are not the same frequency you were 27 minutes ago. That is not small. That is everything. Now, here is the question for you. From which part of the country are you watching this? Drop your state, your city, or your country in the comments below. Let us see how far this signal has traveled. Let us see how wide the field of harmonic anchors has become. You are not alone in this. You never were.